Welcome to Confessions by Banana Ketchup. The Thing in the Woods. Hello everyone, this is my first post. I had considered writing down all of my paranormal experiences in the past, but I just never got around to it and only spoke of them to people I know, until now. I had moved to the Hudson Valley region in upstate New York when I was 12 with my mother and stepfather. My mom had had many paranormal experiences before this point, but I didn't know of them yet. I myself had never experienced anything that I can remember before moving into our townhouse apartment. I don't know if there is any order to these memories because they all blur together, but I digress. The first thing that comes to mind is how terrified I was of the woods behind the apartment complex. It wasn't a massive forest by any means, but it was a good half-mile of dense trees. Unfortunately, the garbage disposal, the recycling bin, and the laundromat were all beside said woods, and even in the daytime you couldn't see much behind the initial line of trees. Oftentimes, I would be the one to take the garbage and recycling out, or I was the one doing the laundry. And since I had school and after-school activities, I would be doing these chores at night. I would always run full speed to either the shack that held the bins or the laundromat, do the chores that needed doing when safely inside, and then run back to my townhouse as soon as I was done. The reason was that I would always felt something watching me from those woods, as if I were a frightened rabbit that could sense a hungry fox nearby. Whenever I was alone next to those woods at night, I felt like prey. This leads me to my first experience. I was playing soccer with my cousin as it was getting dark, our family inside the house chatting and no neighbors in sight. My cousin kicked the ball a little too hard and it landed only a few feet from the tree line. Not thinking much of it, I rushed over to grab it. When I bent down to pick it up though, I saw the legs of a shadowy figure standing in front of me. I stood up quickly and, too scared to take a good look at whatever it was, I ran over to my cousin and told him what happened. As soon as I turned to point it out, whatever it was gone. This next experience is probably the one that haunts me the most. There was a walking path behind the apartments that led to the road on the other side of the woods. And about halfway down the path, there was an abandoned house with a small overgrown field of what I think was wheat growing beside it. The woods surrounding the area on all sides. A neighbor kid and I decided to walk the path before it got dark, and we passed by the house without really looking at it. As we were heading back, my neighbor stopped in his tracks and smacked my arm to get my attention, saying, "What is that?" I followed his gaze to find a tall figure standing in the field, well above the stalks, which had to have at least been 5 feet high. The thing had the body of a man, but from its head came these long antlers. I froze for just a moment, staring in disbelief, when the neighbor kid grabbed my arm and yelled, "Run!" We booked it home, and after parting ways that evening, we never spoke of the incident again. The last story is actually my mom's. It was late, probably around midnight, and everyone in the house but my mom was asleep upstairs. She couldn't go to bed, so she stayed up watching TV until she felt tired. In the middle of the show, she heard what sounded like a small kitten meowing outside the living room window. She ignored it, and the noise stopped, so she continued her show. Once again, she heard the sound of a kitten crying, so she paused the TV and went outside. She looked everywhere, but she couldn't find anything. Before going back inside, though, she heard the sound again, this time underneath our family car in the parking lot, a good 10 feet away from the original sound. She walked up to the car and looked underneath it, as well as under the surrounding cars, but again, she found nothing. Feeling like she was losing her mind, she turned to go back inside when she heard the meowing again, but this time it was coming from the tree line, which was nearly 20 feet from the car. She told me she felt a shiver run down her spine as she realized the meowing sounded like it was on a loop, feeling as though something was trying to lure her into the woods. She turned on her heels and ran back to the house, locking the deadbolt on the door as soon as she got inside. She and I have had discussions about these experiences a lot, and she wonders if it was a Wendigo or some other kind of cryptid. What do you think? Thank you, Galaxy Gab, the author. I believe the ghost of a suicide victim tried to get me to kill myself too. I shared this story in a comment in an askreddit post, then realized it would probably be appreciated here. This is a true story, trigger warning for suicide. My husband and I moved into an apartment a couple of years ago, where I started to basically go insane. It always felt like someone was watching me, and I became horrifically depressed. I would get so sad that sometimes I would even just spontaneously start crying, and I often fantasized about hanging myself from the rafters in this one room. I would sometimes hear the rafters creaking and go in there, then imagine myself hanging in front of the window, being the cause of the creaking. I had been depressed in the past, but this was something on another level. I was seriously suicidal, despite being happily married and genuinely enjoying life before moving into this place. I thought that I had some serious mental illness that was emerging. Several months into living there, our neighbor, a sweet old woman that had lived in the building for decades, told us that a young woman hung herself from the rafters in that room in the late 80s. She was discovered by a man walking his dog who saw her hanging in front of the window. Our neighbor said she was a very unfriendly person who kept to herself and never had anyone over. According to her, every single one of the female tenants in their mid-20s to early 30s that have moved in since her suicide never renewed their leases past the first year, and all seemed troubled, as she put it, while they lived there. I was 27 at the time, the exact same age she was when she died. My husband and I noped the duck out of there pretty much immediately after we learned this. We still had a few months left on our lease, so we had to pay double rent during that time. But it was worth it. Literally the day we got out, my mental health recovered completely and has been back to normal ever since. I believe with all my heart that she was there in that apartment with us, and for whatever reason, she wanted me to repeat history and endure the same fate as her. Thank you, Either Difference 20, the author. Did an angel save my life, or am I a psychic? When I was younger, my sibling and I shared the same bedroom. My sister slept in the top bunk, and I slept at the bottom. Late one night, as I was sleeping, I started to get this weird urgency to get up. This was then accompanied by a weird dream. In this dream, I could clearly hear my mom and dad telling me, "Get up, it's getting late." I clearly heard it was them, but then was also another voice I couldn't recognize. As they were telling me to wake up, the urgency got more and more unbearable, so I opened my eyes. I turned to check the time on my clock and noticed that my vision was very blurry. This was not weird for me since I do use glasses. The problem was that once I put them on, my vision was still blurry. So, as I got up from my bed, I saw a blanket of smoke slowly growing inside my room. I quickly woke up my parents and my sister, and we were able to get out on time. The firefighters were called, and that was the end of that. When I checked the time, it was 5 a.m. I had never ever gotten up that early, and that dream slowly came back to my mind. Had I not had that stranger and my parents telling me to wake up in my dream, we would have all died. Now, this was not the only paranormal occurrence in my life. A little before my aunt died, I had horrible nightmares in which one of my family members always died. But I never saw who. Then she passed away. I'm a devout Christian, so when my non-Christian friends suggested to me that I could be a psychic, I was more inclined to say it was angels. But then another friend also told me that in the Bible, it says that God can give people gifts or virtues. She suggested that I pray about it and work my gift. But I'm still confused. Was it an angel or am I a psychic? Thank you, MinkgeJin, the author. Thank you for watching, everyone. What do you guys think about these stories? Leave a comment down below. See you again in my next video, and until then, please be safe.